everyone, and welcome back to Let's Take 5, the podcast where we take a cinema legend and take 5 of their films to highlight their excellence and range. My name is Austin Luger.
My name's Ray Martindale.
And today we're on week 2 of our Stanley Kubrick Five. Last week we covered The Killing, and today we're going towards a different movie about killing with Paths to Glory.
Of all the movies, this was the one I was the most excited for you to rewatch.
And it was one that I was excited to rewatch because I saw this one kind of late when I was finishing up the Kubrick canon, and I remember being surprised about liking it, and then I forgot the whole movie. But I was very, very happy to rewatch this one.
Why do you think you forgot the whole movie?
I don't know. I remember watching it on VHS in my kitchen. I remember where I was watching it.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens.
In case you haven't seen this film, this is a movie about... you have these French soldiers who are assigned to take this German anthill. And
World War
One. It is an incredibly dangerous situation. These armchair generals know that basically all the troops are going to die, but it would be a good tactical location to have, so it's worth to have all the troops die. And they're very nonchalant about it. And this is the story of Kirk Douglas as Colonel Dax trying to lead his troops out there, and they just get destroyed, really. And they don't do it, and they kind of retreat back because it's an impossible area to do. And they're put on trial for cowardice and disobedience, and it's a lot of it's a movie about authority. It's a movie about trying to stand up for what is right and what is civil within war, especially when you're on the same side. Yeah,
I think in a lot of ways too, it's the perfect sort of indictment of World War One. Like logic. So World War I was the period of time where basically, and I'm not the first person to ever say this, but it's the first time where like old military tactics met with new technology. So this was the first like war where you're having like the charge still be, or the last war really, where you're having the charge still be a thing. Like, let's charge, man, let's charge. And you would just overwhelm them with numbers. Unfortunately, now that doesn't work anymore because I have a machine gun and I can just mow you all down in a matter of seconds. So as far as being like, I mean, how dirty of the war this was and how basically a whole generation of human beings, particularly on the French side, was lost in a war, I think this sort of serves as sort of the best, I guess indictment's kind of the wrong word. I mean, war's bad. I think most people think that even when they think it's necessary. But it is probably the best sort of like imagery of that, I think, that's probably ever come about in cinema. So, like, here we go. The big scene in this movie is a charge where they're charging to take an anthill, and that's impossible because I can mow you down with a machine gun. And it's done. That is one of the most famous scenes in the movie, if not the most famous, the scene right before it where Colonel Dax is walking down the entrenchment. But yeah, it just shows the brutality of trench warfare, which basically in World War II, the whole idea of the Blitzkrieg comes out from Germany to just keep moving and keep annihilating everything in your path because they were so afraid of ending up in a trench. Like, literally, the necessity of pushing force and advancement and conquering Poland in 2 weeks, which is what they did, came out of a fear of ending up in a trench again, because that warfare is just brutal and awful, and it's measured in inches, not miles. So, anyway, I just thought it was probably the greatest encapsulation of that.
And it's so interesting. I mean, people have talked about why there are more World War II films than World War I films, and the common answer is that World War II films, has a very easy enemy. The Nazis are a very, like, that is the threat that must be attacked. That's the way to tell the narrative. There are 3 major World War I films that I know of, and I've only seen 2 of them. One of them I just covered on the other podcast a couple of weeks ago, which is All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a wonderful novel and a wonderful movie. And both of those, that movie is from the German point of view in World War I, and this movie is from the French point of view, but neither film has the other as the narrative enemy. Both of these films are about being really mad at the authorities that put them there. And it looks at age as a major factor for this, because the armchair generals who put them out there are older, and they're clearly like veterans of a different type of war, and they're putting younger people in a new type of war with bad information.
Yeah, and that was a big problem with World War I, was bad information and misinformation. And I don't remember the story. There's a name for this, so if some historians listening, they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. There was a time or a part in World War I where there was going to be a sneak attack from the French to the German line, and those plans were intercepted and given to the Germans. And the Germans literally knew they were coming. The French didn't care. They went ahead with the mission anyway. 116,000 people were killed.
Oh my God!
I know. So it's and there is a name for that. I can't remember what it is. But yeah, I mean, it's just, in particular with this war, you had that older generation with a completely different idea of what war is than how it's actually fought, and that's what ended up happening here.
In the movie, it's such an amazing sympathy for the soldier as an individual unit, as a single person standing there, as the whole team is being court-martialed. They have to have 3 men go forward to kind of represent the entire group, so 100 men aren't killed by this court-martial. And, a number of them draw lots, and there's so much questioning from these characters saying, like, why do I have to die, basically, because my straw was shorter? Like, that's... Yeah. It's madness that decided that a man was going to be murdered, basically. Right. And there's so much confusion and just there's so much apathy in the eyes of the court system and these older generals towards the meaningless death, because the anthill isn't even like the biggest thing in the whole war. It's just like it's
just a strategic point they'd like to have.
That's nearby, basically.
They're willing to have thousands of people die to have.
And and you don't see them ever debate the ethics or morals of this, or even like care. Like they're drinking, I think, while they're doing this.
Human life is cheap in this movie in a way that, even if I included Schindler's List, I don't know if it's quite this is, of the films we've covered, human life is extraordinarily cheap in this, and that's the unfortunate burden of the soldier, and that's sort of what the story, I guess, is kind of all about. I really don't matter.
Yeah,
like, you literally are going to use me until I die, and you won't care.
And there's actually an interesting, I think, comparison between those films, because Spielberg's tactic of that idea is completely emotional based. It is having characters trying to fathom the nature of hate and evil as you watch people just in such tears and agony as they die, and to witness like so many like bodies on the ground and things that are happening. Kubrick's way of approaching this is the way he approaches a lot of his storytelling, which is very much logic based. And the logic, I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but you're watching the trial sequence, and it's just insane. You're trying to basically watch a strange battle of the wits, but the one that you're rooting for, Colonel Dax, is almost like just try not to scream, but don't kill them. But there's no reason to kill them.
Yeah, and then coming from a logic base too, and this gets more famous in World War II, when Russia famously murdered all their troops that retreated. I mean, everyone knows about that. In this case, in World War I, it's the French firing on them. And what logical sense does it make to kill your own troops?
Right.
I mean, come on.
Now you have fewer troops.
Yeah, exactly. Even if, from a sense of a trench warfare perspective, you have to keep the line moving forward. But at the same time, you're not going to have anybody to move it forward if you kill them. And also, in the trial sequence at the end, when the people are court-martialed and Colonel Dax is sort of in charge of defending them, can we really expect them in the zeitgeist of that time and within the context of the plot to actually acquit these men? I mean, these were the same people that are willing to fire on and kill thousands of their own men. can we expect them to see 3 men?
And they're the judges, too.
Exactly.
That's the crazy thing, because they're already going in with the inherent bias towards their peers and the people who are, like, actually on this 3-person team. And I don't know, it's so insane. Like, and it's also so professional the way they are hurting their own men, because when the asshole General Maru,
Paul Maru, yeah,
when he's angry, when he's watching the attempt to get the anthill, and he sees them like retreating and recognizing that people are not just going to run into the apocalypse.
And such an incredible sequence.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
But then you see back in his safe tent far away, as he looks in with binoculars about what's going on, he decides in a very angry moment to have other soldiers fire on the troops. But the way he doesn't call them up and say fire on our own troops, it's done by the book, which is, okay, this battalion, please fire on these 4 sectors. Mm-hmm. And then they do the math, and they go,
that's our own men.
Sir, it's our own men. The information is correct. They're not going to say it aloud. And I love then their response to it is, we need a written confirmation, because we need assurance that we're not going to basically be screwed over ourselves to fire on our own men. If we're going to, he's making him accountable for what he's doing, and he refuses to do that, because so much of this is it's using the politics of the situation to blame people who shouldn't be blamed. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, and also that puts you in a no-win situation as that person too. Like, you expect people to follow order. They're following orders, and now you're presenting me with an order without an order to do so.
Right.
And that guy is. I hate this phrase, not for any other reason, that's just overused, but it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for that guy. Also, it shouldn't be anti-establishment to say I don't want to murder my own men. Mm-hmm. That's probably, you don't want to be on that side of history,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, Stalin was our ally in World War II. Nobody thinks of Stalin as a good guy,
no.
Mainly because he murdered his own people. So
it's a problem.
Yes, and the imagery of this scene where they're trying to take the anthill. For 1957, special effects limitations or whatever may have existed. It is one of the most intense, to this day, action sequences of them first trying to cross no man's land and then trying to get back. It's incredible. I'm
now paranoid that he didn't direct the killing, because this feels like a totally different director. I enjoyed the killing, but watching this one, everything feels bigger in a really cool way. Because even when they're in a tent, every little piece of design of the artwork feels on purpose, and it feels real. Every frame feels like it's a great. It's mise en scene. That's what the whole thing is about, and everything's done well. The camera is shockingly effective. Those scenes when they're going down the trenches. I don't know if trenches actually were that wide back in World War I, but who cares? It's made for a really great shot of having, because you got Carl Dax doing it, but also you have when the asshole, he's there early too. So you're like, hey guys, how you doing?
Yeah.
You having a good day? He's seeing the people who basically have murdered, and he's annoyed at one guy for not standing up straight enough.
Yeah.
But to see that and to see how they're living,
it feels really authentic. It feels, yeah, exactly. To see how they're living, you see there's a lot of personality in each face in the crowd, so to speak. And the shot's totally iconic on the Criterion collection of the Criterion Blu-ray DVD. The menu screen is just him walking down this trench, and they just loop it. You actually can't tell where it starts and where it ends.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's just it feels like one continuous shot until infinity. It is There are a lot of movies that have. I mean, this is a very familiar type of shot. Everyone's seen this at this point, where the general's walking down and looking at all of his men, maybe right before he gives a rousing speech or whatever. I think this is the best iteration of that as well. And part of that is because I do think that Colonel Dax is one of my favorite Kubrick characters, but it's my favorite Kurt Russell performance. Kirk Douglas, yeah. So Kurt Russell, Kirk Douglas, Kate Blanchett, Kate Winslet. Got it.
Yep.
But, and I would include another Kubrick film on here, Spartacus. I don't think it's that good of a movie. No. And then, Ace in the Hole, which we saw as well, so which we cover on the podcast. It's a really, really well-rounded really well-rounded, beautiful performance, because the movie doesn't work if you don't love and respect Colonel Dax.
And I really like him because as he's challenging authority, he's never not a soldier. I really like how it is very understood that he is going to run towards no man's land with them. Like, he's not going to be the other kind of generals where he's going to, watch his men do it. He knows what he's signing up for, and he goes out there to die, basically. Mm-hmm. And when he's in these courtroom scenes, this isn't like a cheap legal drama kind of thing. He is abiding by the rules of the courtroom. He is providing his testimony and his rebuttal to these things. Things keep getting thrown out because it's ridiculous. The system is ridiculous, not what he's saying is ridiculous. He still wants to be a soldier. He's not he's not becoming an anti-war person. He's anti-bad orders and apathy like this. And I think about the courtroom scene as well. I really liked how Kubrick used space in this film, because you look at the trench scene, and even though I just said they're a bit of a bigger trench, it's still a very tight trench, and it's a trench. There's some dirt.
It's very, very authentic. It feels that way anyway.
And the tents that they're using they're not very big. Not many people can be in them. But the film begins with the two generals trying to do this, and the guy's office is bigger than my apartment. And they're just kind of walking around, moseying around. They just keep moving to kind of keep drinking and chatting.
Interesting.
And then the courtroom scene is huge.
Yeah.
This is giant, unnecessarily big.
Yeah, I actually thought, because again, when the blocking always seems more telegraphed from movies in the past, I actually think in particular the blocking in the scene where they're in the office is really neat. If you notice how the power is shifted, I'm sitting down, you're standing up, then I'll move around over here, and then I'll stand, and then counter you here. I mean, it's very theatrical, but when it's done well, it's not done that well in Philadelphia Story, even though I like the movie. It's not done that well in Harvey, even though I like the movie. This is an instance where, and I know those movies were earlier, but it feels sort of perfected here. And if you watch theater, especially when characters are in positions of you have authority over me, watch how they move in the space, because a more experienced, a more creative, a more brilliant hand is going to balance that space adequately and appropriately, and it's more informative of the narrative and of the characters and the characterization. And that scene in particular I thought was done very, very well between them. Go ahead.
Because the display of power is always interesting, and I can't think of some more specific examples, but because power is dictated not by who is the strongest or biggest or has the best gun, it's by how many stars are on their uniform.
Right. You
can see people are moving differently in the tent when the general is there as opposed to this. They're always... The physicality of the soldiers are always changing because that is apparently as important as stopping the enemy.
Yeah, and authority is balanced. That way, we talked about one specific example where there's a drunk captain. I don't know. He's not a general, but he's above a private.
Yes,
and he's arguing with the private. Private's saying he's drunk, and he's saying, "Well, I'm a captain. It's my word against yours." And the way that space is balanced out is I'm the authority, and you're challenging my authority. And then Colonel Dax walks in the room, and guess what? That's completely flipped on its head. Yeah. And now he has the authority, and it's always very, very present. And you mentioned it feels weird that this is the same director of The Killing. Well, he's only 28 years old when he directed The Killing. You know, I think that we're seeing Kubrick evolve, and then evolve into what ends up hitting. He hits a stride of sort of masterpieces, and at some point, whether you like A Clockwork Orange or not, maybe he gets too confident. And now he's trying to push the envelope too much, and we're going to talk about that when we get to it. But this is not Kubrick trying to be weird or inventive so much as he's just really focused on making this story as good as possible. And I think he really, really achieved something here, which is similar to The Killing in that regard. I don't think The Killing could have been better than what it was. I don't feel like this movie could have been either.
I think The Killing could have been better, but I can't list...
Why?
Well, I can't list my notes for it at the moment.
Yeah.
I didn't prepare. This
You didn't expect that argument.
I didn't. No. This one, I have 2 notes for. I actually really love this movie.
Yeah.
I would hire some French actors to play the French.
Yeah.
Because I forgot they were French until half of the film. I thought they were British.
I think that's probably a 50s thing.
Yeah, it's just a kind of a bummer because Kirk Douglas is amazing in this. I think all the actors.
I think
really
that's
good.
like knocking Schindler's List because they don't speak German.
Yeah, but at least I always remember they were German.
Well, again, you have a clearly defined. That may be a product of the war, as we talked about World War One. We don't really define our enemies that well. I mean, we were very close to being on the side of the Germans in World War One. It was not. It wasn't as black and white as it was in World War Two. So I think a Nazi is a Nazi, whereas. I forgot they were French too, quite honestly. When I rewatched the film for the first time in a long time, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, they're French. And I forgot that too.
I know this is based off a book.
Yes.
And I've not read the book.
Kubrick fashion.
Yeah, which I'm learning as we do these things, that they're all based on books.
Yeah.
And also it's interesting, I didn't know until I kind of did minimum amount of research for this podcast. Jim Thompson co-wrote the screenplay, and I believe it's the same Jim Thompson who did the dialogue for The Killing.
Oh, okay.
The really awesome novelist who I was praising last week. Kubrick is listed as the first writer again, as he was last week, and I think he will be for all of the weeks.
Yeah, I think he is for the rest of them. I think we'll get to it. We'll know more because we sort of do the prep research before each movie just to make sure we know what we're talking about. I think he may have done Clockwork Orange's screenplay on his own. I mean, I know that it was a book by Anthony Burgess, but he doesn't like the movie and. Much like Stephen King doesn't like The Shining. So, but anyway.
Well, I think it's just really interesting because...
It's a love-hate relationship between the authors and Kubrick. Some of them love him afterwards, some of them hate him. So,
and the author of Strangelove co-wrote the movie.
Yeah.
With Kubrick as a writer, it's kind of funny because he is so adored as one of the greatest directors ever made. Nobody talks about him as a writer. And I think this is really interesting because someone like Hitchcock... is considered these story things are so important to him. These are this is a Hitchcock story. But he didn't write any of his screenplays. Kubrick, and this is, I guess, adds to the myth of him being this much of a perfectionist. He made the screenplay. This is his movie up and down. And, I mean, this is co-written by 2 people, Calder Willingham and Jim Thompson. But it's a really tight script.
Yeah, it is.
It's a really tight script with, a really reasonable amount of foreshadowing that is never heavy-handed. Like the scene with the drunk, that's a great example of what's to come of challenging authority.
Well, you said you had 2 notes. You mentioned the fact that hire some French actors.
Yeah. And I don't love the scene at the end with the girl and with the soldiers. You're
gonna have to refresh me a little bit. So they're rough with her? Is that what it is?
The issue is that they're one year saying basically they're having one night out kind of thing.
Yeah, they've just gotten orders that they're going to have to move to the front lines, and Colonel Dax is withholding that information while they enjoy their night out. That's the pretext for the scene.
And basically, you get a big old area with a ton of soldiers all drinking, having a good time. They're not a mob, but they are screaming at the singer, yeah, come on, yeah. And she's not smiling for most of the scene. And it'd be one thing if she was doing a fun cabaret kind of thing and she's singing and having a good time. But the actress chose to, or Kubrick chose to, make her look terrified and just watch the scene going, what is happening here? It was such a weird thing.
Okay,
I mean, I felt I turned on the soldiers for a second and I hadn't the entire movie.
Okay. So I have to get this out of the way because someone in podcast land would freak out if we didn't mention this. That's Kubrick's future wife.
And that's insane. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's she ends up marrying Stanley Kubrick.
She's the only woman in the movie. And she stands up there and getting yelled at by rowdy soldiers.
I don't... I mean, you may not like the scene because of the content of the scene. I don't feel like the scene affects the narrative at all. It's not unrealistic assume that. I mean, we talked about like the apartment and the way the women are treated in the apartment, and it's kind of just a product, not only a product of the time, but also a product of wartime.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that should be addressed, and I think it just kind of really hurt the thematic flow for me, I guess, of like...
But you want them to die now, Austin?
it was one moment where I'm like, oh, I feel really uncomfortable about all this, and I'd be happy to watch a movie kind of about this topic, but to have basically one of the last scenes in the movie about these guys about to die senselessly and how terrible that is weird for me to question them a little bit.
But wouldn't that sort of inform how they're behaving too? Couldn't you say that they're...
Oh, they're in a suicidal mindset?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of dabble into that in Strangelove and the way how they are going to sort women out once it happens. But like, I mean, for all they know, that literally is the last woman all these men are going to see. So that may inform the way they're behaving as well. Yeah. So I just think that like looking at it, if we take this as a portrait of World War I and as a wartime, it doesn't. It doesn't. Now I haven't seen that scene doesn't stick out to me as much. I mean, I've seen the film 2 times in the past 5 months, probably, but that scene's not sticking with me. But as much, I mean, I know the scene exists, but how she's sort of treated. But I think that may just be, yeah. I mean, I feel like it still contains a verisimilitude.
I'm not against like scenes about objectification. I'm not like. They should be in storylines. You can comment a lot about it.
Is that what's happening? Are they just assholes to her? Is it a sexual thing?
I feel like
it can't not be that.
I think it's a bit both. I mean, it's just that it's the hot woman singing for them, and they're just like wooing her. Not
wooing.
No, not that is
a positive connotation.
Yeah, I realize not that kind of wooing. Because like I was thinking of like kind of a good scene in a similar situation. The car wash scene in Cool Hand Luke. That's a fantastic scene of objectification because she's completely playing along with it. You don't feel like that she's being threatened, I guess, at all. And I felt a bit of her being threatened here, and it's just weird. And that could be a great scene in a war movie. Just felt like it was a different movie for about 3 minutes, and then it had 2 great scenes at the end. And it ended.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'd have to see it again. I mean, that's a good example to pull from to sort of counter it. But okay, if she's in a good mood about it or not in a good mood about it, still doesn't affect the way. She
just looked horrified.
I know, but
it's weird.
But are we? I mean, I guess we can judge it on that premise, or we could say. I mean, so then it's okay to catcall a girl if she's okay with being catcalled. But how would you know that if you didn't catcall? Like, it seems exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I think if we keep the focus on how the men are behaving in both of these scenes, and that's just sort of how it should rest its case. You can't say it's good to objectify if she's okay with objectifying. No, yeah. And I know, and I'm saying that's what you're saying, but I'm just saying. We're spending a lot of time on this thing.
I know, it's weird. Let's end on I don't know, another good note about the film before I don't want to end on this.
The men get killed.
I said good note. What are you talking about? I just want to say a positive about the film.
It's a depressing, grimy look at wartime during World War I. I mean, there are good men, there are bad men. It's interesting to see a war film where the villain is on the same side as the hero. I mean, it's an interesting perspective, which is probably, again, a product of it being a World War I film and not a World War II film.
It's true. And we might see traces of that again next week as we are going to review Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I'm going to say the full title the entire episode.
I love that movie. I hate that title. I'm sorry, I really do. I hate it because every time I say it, I screw it up. I always say the love bomb instead of love the bomb. I always say that.
I think that was a cheesy British sex comedy. I think.
That's our positive note.
There it is. There it is.
Positive note.
So, we'll catch you all next week when we review that movie. Until then, please leave us a comment at thearttomorrow.com on this episode and any episode where we want to hear your thoughts about everything. You can follow us on Twitter to find out when we have new episodes up of this show and other show. The Twitter account is at @TheImmortalsPod. You can email us at letstake5@thearttomorrow.com. You can check out the other podcasts. Yesterday we had a new episode of The Immortals, which is the podcast where myself and 4 others review the 1001 movies, albums, food, songs, children's books, and TV shows that you must consume before you die. Yesterday we talked about Breakfast at Tiffany's and the TV show Edge of Darkness. New Ad Absurdum came out last week, and they are talking about Jurassic Park. I'm right now halfway through the episode listening to it, and it's very funny. And I'm surprised about where negligence actually worked in the series.
Yeah, that's like the whole thing about law is it always breaks down to negligence or intent.
Yep. Yeah, and apparently, first film, very little negligence. Jurassic World, holy shit. So listen to that episode to kind of learn all about it. It's very fun. Where can we find you, Eric?
You can find me Constant Aversion. That's my YouTube channel on there. Still working on the Last of Us video. It's going to take a million years. Sorry. It'll be out. It'll be good when it's out.
It'll be out for the sequel.
Yes, it will.
Yes.
That I can promise you.
All right. Thank you all for listening, everyone. My name is Austin.
My name's Eric.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I'm awfully glad you could be there, George. This sort of thing is always rather grim. But this one had a kind of splendor to it, don't you think?
I have never seen an affair of this sort handled any better.
The men died wonderfully. And there's always that chance that one of them will do something that will leave everyone with a bad taste. This time you couldn't ask for better. Yes?
Yes, Colonel?
You wanted to see me, sir.
Oh, yes. Come in, Colonel. Come in and sit down.
Oh, Colonel Dax, your men died very well.
Would you like some coffee, Colonel?
No, thank you, sir.
Oh, by the way, Paul, it's been brought to my attention that you ordered your artillery to fire on your own men during the attack on the anthill.
I did what? Who told you that?
Well, Colonel Dax came to me last night with a story.
Colonel Dax, I've always known that you were a disloyal officer, but I never dreamed that you would stoop to anything so low as this.